eliminate that 1814 fly in the ointment. They'd make sure that after the New World War, they were conspiring there'd be no Tsar of Russia around to throw monkey wrenches into the machinery. History records that World War I was precipitated by a trivial incident, the kind of incident both Weishaupt and Albert Pike had incorporated in their blueprints. That incident was the assassination of an Austrian archduke, arranged by the Illuminati masterminds. The war followed. It involved Germany, Austria-Hungary, and their allies, so-called the Axis powers, against France, Britain, and Russia, called the Allies. Only the United States was not involved during the first 2 years. By 1917, the conspirators had achieved their primary objective. All of Europe was in a state of destitution. All the peoples were war-weary and crying for peace. And the outcome, too, was all set. It was to come as soon as the United States would be hurled in on the side of the Allies. And that was all set to happen immediately after Wilson's re-election. After that, there could be only one outcome: complete victory for the Allies. When Wilson was campaigning for re-election in 1916, his chief appeal was, re-elect the man who will keep your sons out of the war. But during that same campaign, the Republican Party publicly charged that Wilson had long committed himself to throw us into the war. They charged that if he would be defeated, he would accomplish that act during his few remaining months in office. But if re-elected, he would hold off until after re-election. But at that time, the American people looked upon Wilson as a god-man. Well, Wilson was re-elected, and as per the schedule of the conspirators, he hurled us into the war in 1917. He used the sinking of the Lusitania as an excuse, a sinking which also was prearranged. Roosevelt, also a god-man in the eyes of the American people, followed the same technique in 1941 when he used the prearranged Pearl Harbor attack as his excuse for hurling us into World War II. Now, exactly as the conspirators planned, victory for the Allies would eliminate all the monarchs of the defeated nations and leave all their peoples leaderless, confused, bewildered, and perfectly conditioned for the one-world government the great conspiracy intended would follow. But there still would be an obstacle, the same obstacle that had balked the Illuminati and Rothschild at that Congress in Vienna peace gathering after the Napoleonic Wars. Russia would be on the winning side this time, as it was in 1814. Therefore, the Tsar would be securely on his throne. Here it is pertinent to note that Russia, under the Tsarist regime, had been the one country in which the Illuminati had never made any headway, nor had the Rothschilds ever been able to infiltrate their banking interests. Thus, a winning Tsar would be more difficult than ever to cope with. Even if he could be enticed into a so-called League of Nations, it was a foregone conclusion that he would never, but never go for a one-world government. So even before the outbreak of World War I, the conspirators had a plan in the making to carry out Nathan Rothschild's vow of 1814, to destroy the Tsar and also murder all possible royal heirs to the throne. And it would have to be done before the close of the war, and the Russian Bolsheviki were to be their instruments in this particular plot. From the turn of the century, the chiefs of the Bolsheviki were Nikolai Lenin, Leon Trotsky, and later Joseph Stalin. Of course, those were not their true family names. Prior to the outbreak of the war, Lenin headquartered in Paris. After the outbreak, Switzerland became his haven. Trotsky's headquarters were on the Lower East Side in New York, largely the habitat of Russian Jewish refugees. Both Lenin and Trotsky were similarly bewhiskered and unkempt. In those days, that was the badge of Bolshevism. Both lived well, yet neither had a regular occupation. Neither had any visible means of support, yet both always had plenty of money. All those mysteries were solved in 1917. Right from the outset of the war, strange and mysterious goings-on were taking place in New York. Night after night, Trotsky darted furtively in and out of Jacob Schiff's palatial mansion. And in the dead of those same nights, there were gatherings of hoodlums of New York's Lower East Side, all of them Russian refugees, at Trotsky's headquarters. And all were going through some mysterious sort of training process. But it was all shrouded in mystery. Nobody talked, although it did leak out that Schiff was financing all of Trotsky's activities. Then suddenly Trotsky vanished. So did approximately 300 of his trained hoodlums. Actually, they were on the high seas in a Schiff-chartered ship bound for a rendezvous with Lenin and his gang in Switzerland. And on that ship was $20 million in gold. The $20 million Schiff provided to finance the Bolsheviki takeover of Russia. In anticipation of Trotsky's arrival, Lenin prepared to throw a party in his Switzerland hideaway. Men of the very highest places in the world were to be guests at that party. Among them were the mysterious Colonel Edward Mandel House, Woodrow Wilson's mentor and palsy-walsy, and more important, Schiff's special and confidential messenger. Another of the expected guests was Warburg of the Warburg banking clan in Germany, who were financing the Kaiser, and whom the Kaiser had rewarded by making him chief of the secret police of Germany. In addition, there were the Rothschilds of London and Paris, also Litvinov, Kaganovich, Stalin, who was then head of a train and bank-robbing gang of bandits. He was known as the Jesse James of the Urals. And here I must remind that England and France were then long in war with Germany, and that on February 3, 1917, Wilson had broken off all diplomatic relations with Germany. Therefore, Warburg, Colonel House, the Rothschild, and all those others were enemies. But of course, Switzerland was neutral ground where enemies could meet and be friends, especially if they had some scheme in common. That Lenin party was very nearly wrecked by an unforeseen incident. The Schiff-chartered ship on its way to Switzerland was intercepted and taken into custody by a British warship. But Schiff quickly rushed orders to Wilson to order the British to release the ship intact with the Trotsky hoodlums and the gold. Wilson obeyed. He warned the British that if they refused to release the ship, the United States would not enter the war in April, as he had faithfully promised a year earlier. The British heeded the warning, Trotsky arrived in Switzerland, and the Lenin party went off as scheduled. But they still faced what ordinarily would have been the insurmountable obstacle of getting the Lenin-Trotsky band of terrorists across the border into Russia. Well, that's where Brother Warburg, chief of the German secret police, came in. He loaded all those thugs into sealed freight cars and made all the necessary arrangement for their secret entry into Russia. The rest is history. The revolution in Russia took place, and all members of the royal Romanov family were murdered. Now, my chief objective is to establish beyond even a remote doubt that communism, so-called, is an integral part of the Illuminati's great conspiracy for the enslavement of the entire world. That communism, so-called, is merely their weapon and bogeyman word to terrify the peoples of the whole world, and that the conquest of Russia and the creation of communism was in great part organized by Schiff and the other international bankers right in our own city of New York. Charlie Knickerbocker, a Hearst newspaper columnist, published an interview with John Schiff, grandson of Jacob, in which young Schiff confirmed the entire story and named the figure old Jacob contributed, $20 million. If anybody still has even a remote doubt that the entire menace of communism was created by the masterminds of the great conspiracy right in our own city of New York, I will cite the following historical fact. All records show that when Lenin and Trotsky engineered the capture of Russia, they operated as heads of the Bolsheviki party. Now, Bolshevism is a purely Russian word. The masterminds realized that Bolshevism could never be sold as an ideology to any but the Russian people. So in April 1918, Jacob Schiff dispatched Colonel House to Moscow with orders to Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin to change the name of their regime to the Communist Party and to adopt the Karl Marx Manifesto as the constitution of the Communist Party. Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin obeyed. And that year of 1918 was when the Communist Party and the menace of communism came into being. All this is confirmed in Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, 5th edition. In short, communism was created by the capitalists. Thus, until November 11, 1918, the entire fiendish plan of the conspirators worked perfectly. All the great nations, including the United States, were war-weary, devastated, mourning their dead. Peace was the great universal desire. Thus, when it was proposed by Wilson to set up a League of Nations to ensure peace, all the great nations, with no Russian Tsar to stand in their way, jumped on that bandwagon without even stopping to read the fine print in that insurance policy. That is all but one, the United States, the very one that Schiff and his co-conspirators least expected would balk. And that was their one fatal mistake in that early plot. You see, when Schiff planted Woodrow Wilson in the White House, the conspirators assumed that they had the United States in the proverbial bag. Wilson had been perfectly built up as a great humanitarian. He supposedly became established as a God-man with the American people. There was every reason for the conspirators to have believed that he would easily hornswoggle Congress into buying the League of Nations sight unseen, exactly as the Congress of 1945 bought the United Nations sight unseen. But there was one man in the Senate in 1918 who saw through that scheme just as the Russian Tsar did in 1814. He was a man of great political stature, almost as great as that of Teddy Roosevelt, and fully as astute. He was highly respected and trusted by all members of both houses of Congress and by the American people. The name of that great and patriotic American was Henry Cabot Lodge, not the phony of today who called himself Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. until he was exposed. Lodge completely unmasked Wilson and kept the United States out of the League of Nations. Here it becomes of great interest to know the real reason for the Wilson League of Nations flop. As I previously stated, Schiff was sent to the United States to carry out 4 specific assignments. Number 1 and most important was to acquire complete control of the U.S. money system. Number 2, as outlined in the original Weishaupt Illuminati blueprint, he was to find the right kind of men to serve as stooges for the great conspiracy and promote them into the highest offices in our federal government, our Congress, our U.S. Supreme Court, and all federal agencies, such as the State Department, the Pentagon, the Treasury Department, etc. Number 3, destroy the unity of the American people by creating minority group strife throughout the nation, especially between the whites and blacks as outlined in Israel Cohen's book. Number 4, create a movement to destroy religion in the United States, with Christianity to be the chief target or victim. In addition, he was strongly reminded of the imperative directive in the Illuminati blueprint to achieve full control of all mass communications media, to be used to brainwash the people into believing and accepting all of the maneuverings of the great conspiracy. Schiff was warned that only control of the press, at that time our only mass communications media, would enable him to destroy the unity of the American people. Now then, Schiff and his co-conspirators did set up the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of the Colored People, in 1909. And in 1913, he set up the Anti-Defamation League. Both were to create the necessary strife. But in the early years, the ADL operated very timidly, perhaps for fear of a pogrom-like action by an aroused and enraged American people. In addition, he, Schiff was busy developing and infiltrating the Stooges to serve in all high places in our Washington government and in the job of acquiring control of our money system and the creation of the 16th Amendment. He also was very busy with the organizing of the plot for the takeover of Russia. In short, he was kept so busy with all those jobs that he completely overlooked the supreme job of acquiring complete control of our mass communications media. That oversight was the direct cause for Wilson's failure to lure the United States into the League of
Wall
Nations.
assist, baby.
Because when Wilson decided to go to the people to overcome the opposition of the
This guy.
controlled Senate, despite his established but phony reputation as a great humanitarian, he found himself faced by a solidly united people and by a loyal press whose only ideology was Americanism and the American way of life. At that time, due to the ineptness and ineffectiveness of both the ADL and the NAACP, there were no organized minority groups, no Negro problems, no so-called anti-Semitic problem to sway the people's thinking. There were
Triple
no
kill.
limits, there
Holy
were no
shit.
rights, no prejudices for crafty exploitations. Thus, Wilson's League of Nations appeals fell on deaf ears. The control of the press was assigned to Rockefeller. Thus, Henry Luce, who recently died, was financed to set up a number of national magazines, among them Life, Time, Fortune, and others, which publish USSR in America. The Rockefellers also directly or indirectly financed the Cowles Brothers Look magazine and a chain of newspapers. They also financed a man named Sam Newhouse to buy up and build a chain of newspapers all over the country. And the late Eugene Meyer, one of the founders of CFR, bought the Washington Post, Newsweek, the weekly magazine, and other publications. At the same time, CFR began to develop and nurture a new breed of scurrilous columnists and editorial writers, such as Walter Lippmann, Drew Pearson, the Alsops, Herbert Matthews, Irwin Cannon, and others of that ilk, who called themselves liberals, who proclaimed that Americanism is isolationism, that isolationism is warmongerism, that anti-communism is anti-Semitism and racism. All that took time, of course, but today our entire press, except for some local small-town papers and weeklies published by patriotic organizations, is completely controlled by CFR stooges, and thus they finally succeeded in breaking us up into a nation of quarreling, wrangling, squabbling, hating factions. Now, if you still wonder about the slanted news and outright lies you read in your paper, you
How did I
have the
miss
answer.
that?
To the Lehmans, Goldman Sachs, Kuhn Loeb, and the Warburgs, the CFR assigned the job of getting control of the motion picture industry, Hollywood, radio and television, and believe you me, they succeeded. If you still wonder about the strange propaganda broadcasts by the Ed Murrows, Chet Huntley, Howard K. Smith, Eric Severite, Drew Pearson, and others of that ilk, you have the answer. If you wonder about all the smut, sex, pornography, and mixed marriage films you see in your movie theater and on your TV set, all of which is demoralizing our youth, you have the answer. It tells in detail how the press, the movies, TV, and radio have been, and still are, used to brainwash the people, to demoralize our youth, and they have been and still are encouraging and creating sympathy for the rioting civil rights lawlessness. To the vast majority of the American people, our foreign policy for many years has been a complete enigma. Most of us simply can't understand why this great nation is seemingly floundering so helplessly in the art of diplomacy. We can't understand why our leaders are seemingly so confused and bewildered in all their dealings. Now I have one more vital message to deliver. As I told you, one of the 4 specific assignments Rothschild gave Jacob Schiff was to create a movement to destroy religion in the United States, with Christianity to be the chief target. For a very obvious reason. The Anti-Defamation League wouldn't dare to attempt it, because such an attempt could create the most terrible bloodbath in the history of the world, not only for the ADL and the conspirators, but for the millions of innocent Jews. Schiff turned that job over to Rockefeller for another specific reason. The destruction of Christianity could be accomplished only by those who are entrusted to preserve it, by the pastors, the men of the cloth. As a starter, John D. Rockefeller picked up a young so-called Christian minister by the name of Dr. Harry F. Ward. Reverend Ward, if you please. At that time, he was teaching religion at the Union Theological Seminary. Rockefeller found a very willing Judas in this reverend. Thereupon, in 1907, he financed him to set up the Methodist Foundation of Social Service. And Ward's job was to teach bright young men to become so-called ministers of Christ and to place them as pastors of churches. While teaching them to become ministers, the Reverend Ward also taught them how to very subtly and craftily preach to their congregations that the entire story of Christ is a myth, to cast doubts on the divinity of Christ, to cast doubts about the Virgin Mary. In short, to cast doubts on Christianity as a whole. It was not to be a direct attack, but much of it by crafty insinuation that was to be applied in particular to the youth in the Sunday schools. Remember Lenin's statement, "Give me just one generation of youth, and I'll transform the whole world." Then, in 1908, the Methodist Foundation of Social Service, which incidentally was America's first communist front organization, changed its name to the Federal Council of Churches. By 1950, the Federal Council of Churches was becoming very suspect. So in 1950, they changed the name to the National Council of Churches. Do I have to tell you more about how this National Council of Churches is deliberately destroying faith in Christianity? I don't think so. But this I will tell you. If you are a member of any congregation whose pastor and church are members of this Judas organization, your contributions are helping the Illuminati's
that kid was cheating, holy shit.
And faith in God and Jesus Christ. Thus you are deliberately delivering your children to be indoctrinated with disbelief in God and church, and which can easily transform them into atheists. Find out immediately if your church is a member of the National Council of Churches, and for the love of God and your children, if it is, withdraw from it at once. However, let me warn you, that same destroy religion process has been infiltrated into other denominations.
So we wanted to go to Washington, D.C., and we wanted to dig up some information that we could then present to either validate or disprove the claims that Tom had made. Tom Horn believed that he had found a secret location in D.C. where the Antichrist would be resurrected. This idea that the biblical narrative of the Antichrist is going to suffer a deadly wound and that he's going to somehow be majestically, magically, supernaturally resurrected. And that was going to be a sign to the world that he is, in fact, a supernatural king. Now, what's crazy about the idea of a supernatural king is that this goes back to the writings of Manly P. Hall, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point today. But a supernatural king. That is exactly what the world will think when they see somebody rise from the dead. Matter of fact, Jesus Christ himself, when he rose from the dead, he brought back others with him. A lot of people don't realize that there was a multitude of people that came back with Jesus. And there's evidence that they died normal lives again. But regardless of that, Jesus did so many feats to prove who he was. Well, the Antichrist, the word anti means in place of, instead of. It can also mean against. But in the scenario of the biblical Antichrist, the one that's still to come, He is instead of Christ. He is a replacement Christ. He is a counterfeit Christ. So it makes perfect sense what the scripture says, that he will suffer a deadly wound and that he's going to come back. And the world is going to marvel at this. But the question is, what are the events going to be that surround this resurrection? Where is this resurrection going to take place? And where does America fit into the picture? These were questions that we needed answered as we set out on this project. Tom Horn was very confident, especially after learning the Masonic system listen, there's a Masonic conspiracy surrounding this specific location in Washington, D.C. We didn't actually get right into the chamber because it's hidden, it's locked, but we got pretty close. And while we were there, we had some very strange things happen that let us know that we were on the right track.
It's basically what started off at Babel. They had a one world system, religion, language, probably economy. They had a one world dictator, Nimrod, and they were, in defiance to God, they were going to build that tower to be able to go up there and, who knows, but God looked at it, and we know how that ended. He came down and threw the smackdown. He threw the gauntlet down and said, it's not time. If I were to let this continue, then there's nothing that they wouldn't be able to do. There's elements that are controlling the scenes today that are trying to fulfill all these esoteric prophecies. The same thing that Nimrod started to do. So you got to remember that Satan is the god of this world. Well, they were worshiping the fallen angels back then, right? They had the gods of old. These are the same ones that continue to be worshipped today by various different sects and leaders of government and the members of the deep state. That's why they do the rituals and what have you. But it started off back then, and these people it's been passed down from generation to generation, this ideology, this belief system, that this Antichrist, this Messiah, this person in place of Christ is going to come. And right now we're seeing that they're setting up his world kingdom to be taken over by him.
The nation of America has a hidden history that most people aren't really aware of. There's a lot of conspiracy theories and a lot of ideas, but in reality, America, we have evidence that America, before it was called America, that it was known as this great Western Hemisphere. Okay, the Western Hemisphere, that is what was prophesied by Plato. You had, even the Greek biographer Plutarch talked about voyages to this great land in the ancient world. So really, you got to get past this whole American mindset of Christopher Columbus and the Native American Indians. Governor DeWitt Clinton, former governor of New York, who was also held a prestigious role at the New York Historical Society. And he said on record that they had come into contact with ancient fortifications on our soil, and these fortifications were evidence that there was an advanced civilization far exceeding that of the Native American Indians right here in America. Now this was on record with DeWitt Clinton. When you consider the fact that the types of news we get today versus the type of news that was in the early part of this nation, it's totally different. It's all fake news today, all of it. All sides of it that you're going to get on TV. The old news that we found articles, we found all types of information showing that there was an ancient civilization here before the Native Americans, that there was this idea of serpent worship on this continent, and Plato himself, which Plato is a worldwide household name. Everyone knows who Plato is. Major occultist, democratic mindset. They believed that in the end times there would be a great nation that was going to rise up in the Western Hemisphere. Again, the Western Hemisphere is the key. The great nation of the Western Hemisphere is going to rise up. It's going to take its rightful place as the beacon of light that was going to rule the world. It was going to bring about a philosophic empire, a one-world philosophic empire, and it was going to be utilizing the creeds and the beliefs of the old pagan world. What does that mean in modern terms? It's going to be a resurrection of the old religions, the Babylonian mystery schools, the secret societies, the gods of old, possibly a reference even to the 72 fallen angels. When you start talking about the divine council, that there was going to be a resurrection of these things, a revival of these things, but specifically that this great nation. Now, when you look at the nation of America today, we literally fulfill so much of what the scripture teaches about this great whore of Babylon. And we break all this down in our films specifically so people can see history lined up with scripture. Why doesn't America show up in the Bible? Well, we believe it does. but you have to have eyes to see and you have to have ears to hear. You also have to have a better understanding of this nation, America. Now let me take you back to some of these ancient views of America. The idea was we were going to be that nation that was going to bring about this democratic commonwealth to the world. Democracy, that was the goal of the ancient philosophers. Democracy was actually an occult view. Now this might shock some people watching this video, but democracy is an occult view. It's all about bringing together a certain type of system. Now, you start studying the end times, you find out it's a beast system, it's a control grid set up for everyone to be living under one basic ruler. Now, think about this. The Native Americans, we have evidence now that Native Americans that were here, not all of them, but by and large, they had secret societies that were literally ancient forms of Freemasonry within their Native American tribes. Satanic rituals, blood rituals. We even have evidence of underground kivas, temples, which I'm sure you're familiar with when you get into the whole Four Corners conspiracy. All these things taking place on American soil. But interestingly, we find out that the God who they revered and worshipped, again, not all of them, but by majority, we're dealing with a serpent god, a plumed, feathered serpent god. The same god shows up in Mexico under the name Quetzalcoatl. You go down into Quiché. In Quiché, they called him Gucumatz, and then in Peru, they called him Amaru. Amaru is the root of the word America. Amaruca literally translates over the land of the plumed serpent. Now, when we get into Ephesians and we understand what spiritual warfare looks like, Paul tells us we're not wrestling with flesh and blood. We're actually wrestling with principalities. Okay, these are fallen angel entities over nations, over land, over different areas. These are the things that affect what goes on underneath. These are fallen, by the way. These are not good entities. These are the higher entities that are in league with Satan. Now, I believe that the plumed serpent god is literally Satan himself. So when you consider that we are living on a land, a massive land in the Western Hemisphere, that the ancients all prophesied was going to be the land that was going to lead the world into a worldwide global democracy that was going to be a beacon of light, bringing about all the old religions and schools of the world. That really makes more sense now that we understand that our nation has been revering and worshiping Lucifer long before the Native Americans got here. They inherited these things from the giants, the white giants that were here before them, the advanced civilizations. And I'll even say this, Sir Francis Bacon, who I believe Francis Bacon was William Shakespeare. He penned the book, The New Atlantis. He believed that this land called North America, he believed that this was the site of the original Atlantis. He also believed that this land was going to be fulfilling major prophecies according to what he studied in the occult world, going all the way back to ancient Greece. So, interestingly, when you study the writings of the New Atlantis, you're going to find out that America has been fulfilling these prophecies. I mean, it makes perfect sense. So much so that the occultists, such as Manly P. Hall, who was a major theosophist, by the way, he taught that America was going to be that beacon of light in the last days. He said that this nation was literally going to be shining like a light on a hill. That we were going to shine across the world, and we were going to bring about a democratic commonwealth. We were going to bring about the old religions of the world, the superior ancient knowledge, and that we were going to be that nation that was spoken of by all the old mystics and the prophets of old. Now, part of that is also reviving the Egyptian mystery schools. All of these things have been fulfilled, but here's the thing. The secret societies, they have been maintaining the language, the rituals, the esoteric knowledge. They've been maintaining all of this secretly for thousands of years, passing it on. But they've also suffered persecution over the years. That's why they called them secret societies. They had to go into secrecy. They had to hide these things because they didn't want the common man to understand them. What's interesting about this is that the secret societies that rule America, that founded this nation, we believe that was the reason that they came here under the guise of freedom of religion. See, we've been taught that freedom of religion was all about Christians being able to worship freely. Well, this is a Christian nation, we've been told. Founded by Christians, for Christians, by Christians. I can't think of a greater lie, a greater deception upon this nation other than freedom of religion was for us as Christians. Furthermore, we have come to the conclusion that freedom of religion was a cloak that would allow all the secret societies to come and operate freely here, and even to set up policy a lot of the policy that we've seen over the years was set with the mindset of protecting the secret societies, allowing them to get where they need to be so that they can operate and they can call down the God's call.
So the deep state has three different levels. At first, you have the legislative branch and bureaucracy of spreading this ideology out on the world stage. Underneath that, you have the second level, which influences the first level. And so in that level, you have foreign governments, you have occult secret societies, your Skull and Bones, and etc. Then you also have your think tanks and all of those, and rich globalists that want to see their agenda make it to affect that first level. So that's the second level, and they're all influencing the first level. Underneath that is the spirit realm. So these people that are in the secret societies and occultists and want to see it put out on the first level of the world stage, they're going and they're doing these rituals, and we choose Bohemian Grove for that purpose because we don't have enough time to break down every secret society and their purposes and whatever. Ultimately, their goal is all the same. But at the Bohemian Grove, it's like where the walls come down. That's where the ritual aspect of things come, and the third level of the deep state. So the third level is tapping into the spirit realm to be able to get your power and to be able to get your direction, and that influences the second level, and that influences the first level, and that's how it goes across the world scene to be enacted. Ultimately, Luciferianism, Satanism, these rituals to tap into the other side to get their direction. It's kind of like being a Christian. You know, God gives us certain guidelines in His book. It's our basic instructions before leaving Earth. It's our guidelines to be able to make it here, right? I mean, we're lost without that. And so He gives us certain criteria on how to pray, how to communicate, how to worship. He gave in the Old Testament very specifics about how to build the temple. You know, it's just one example. And so when you're dealing with the occult side of things, that's the opposite end of the spectrum. That's the occultists they're following just as diligently as a true believer of Christ, follows Him, submits their life to Him, stays in the Word, lives the Word, right? Just as that diligence is, they're just as diligent, but it's for the opposite side. So with the occult, you've got these practices that have been passed down for millennia. And these people that are in power today are still practicing the same things. They're still wanting to see this system come in so that they can have their final go at taking over this world, destroying Christianity. Ultimately, it's not against us. I mean, yes, it is against humanity, but ultimately it's against God.
People say, well, what about George Washington? You know, because he's touted as such a man of integrity. Matter of fact, there's records that he attended church regularly, a Christian church. There's also records that he and his pastor, there's letters that have been written. Matter of fact, Library of Congress is a prime field to be picking truthful pieces of fruit. You want to get fruitful research? Hey, go to the Library of Congress. What we find out is that the pastor, one of Washington's pastors, he said that overall he spoke with Washington time and time again that Washington was a deist. Okay, Washington didn't want to have a problem with the guy. He wanted to continue going to the church because it was a political move. But in reality, Washington said he was a deist. They went back and forth on this matter. This has been documented historically. He was not a Christian. He was definitely a deist. Now, others will argue that Washington renounced the Masonic Lodge. Well, that's only a half-truth. Okay, he renounced the British Lodge. See, when he came over and started setting things up, like in this new era, if you will, he had to renounce the old to become part of the new. And so he was actually part of the Alexandrian Lodge. I forget the exact number of the lodge, but if you Google this, you're going to find out exactly which lodge Washington was a part of in Virginia. I think it might have been Lodge 122, but I forget. I don't want to quote that, but he renounced the British, joined on with the current lodge that was setting up in the New World. They were two separate systems. Now, they were very similar, but they were separate. Matter of fact, their idea was to come and set up a government here that was almost identical to the oligarchy that they left. See, most people don't realize that. They don't realize that Washington was part of a grand conspiracy to create basically a new oligarchy here, a government controlled by a few. And that's all historical. We document that in our film. But the idea was to set that up, but to give more freedoms. But it still allowed the elite to run everything that the government wants. any move of the government, the elite were going to be involved. They were not going to allow the common man to make decisions. Matter of fact, when the Constitution and some of the founding documents were signed, those windows were locked. Lieutenant Colonel Arthur McGinnis from the Pentagon, he came on record and he talked to us about this for the film. He points to the fact that the founding fathers were a deep state, which we would call shadow government. Back to Washington. Washington was definitely a Freemason. Matter of fact, they cast sprigs of acacia at his Masonic funeral to signify him going on to the land of Osiris in the underworld. Now, they believed Osiris was already in the underworld, and they believed that Washington was the America's first Osiris, but he wasn't meant to be the final. He was meant to be a type. And we see that in how they went down and went through with his funeral. As a matter of fact, if you go back and study the death and the funerals of Washington, you're going to find out that there were two. You had two different eulogies. You want to look for the Masonic eulogy that was presented by Timothy Bigelow Jr. That literally paints the picture. Look, Washington was not just a porch mason, okay? He knew what he was doing. He knew he was very much invested in this. We have evidence that not only was he a Mason, but he was a Mason in good standing all the way up until his death. A lot of people say he renounced the lodge. Again, he did, but it was the British lodge, not the American lodge. What's crazy about this is that he was literally being set up in a system that was a religious system that was set up to bring about the spirit of Osiris, a resurrected spirit, a reincarnated spirit, if you will, of Osiris, to possess the ruler of this nation. Washington never made it to the crypt. They did not put him in the crypt that they built for him because we believe they didn't build it for him. They said they did, but it's kind of like the government says that they're building, these military bases, and then immediately
that was a tough loss.
Military base after they build it because they had other plans for it. The government does this all the time. They set up the crypt of Washington. They installed it very much strategically, which we break down all the strategy involved here. The crypt of Washington is sitting at the basement level of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. This is literally a page out of ancient Egyptian magic. We break this down step by step by step in the film. We show everything. How you go up and you walk into the Capitol building. You look up, and what do you see in the dome? You see this thing called the apotheosis of George Washington. Now, if you really was a Christian, like so many people say, all you gotta do is look up and see the heaven that George Washington is ascending into, which is painted on this massive mural, and he's surrounded by all the pagan gods. You say, well, why on earth, if Washington was a Christian, why would he be getting deified in the first place into a god? That's what the word apotheosis means. Literally, Washington becoming a god. Walt Whitman, the famous American poet, said that George Washington was becoming the Osiris. Now, pagan gods, what does this have to do with D.C.? Well, Thomas Jefferson literally designed the city to honor the old pantheon of pagan gods. This is on record at the Library of Congress. People can investigate what's called the most approved plan. They literally built this city to pull a line from the Ghostbusters, how they talk about drawing down the power on these certain buildings, cursed buildings, buildings that are set up for drawing down occult power. The city of D.C. literally was built as a massive ritualistic chessboard to do public rituals en masse. So the Washington Monument, people like to go and look at it. Everybody wants to see it, but they don't understand the history of it. But just the measurements alone should be enough to raise some questions. It's 555 feet tall above ground, and the physics involved, in order to keep it from falling over, you have 111 feet inside the earth. So you're ending up with a totality of 666 feet total from tip to base inside the earth. But what's crazy about this is that in the base of it, they have inculcated the magic Apollonian square. Now, they believe that this square has a binding factor to it, that it can bind certain things. Some people call it a 666 square. We do a full breakdown of this in the film, and the 666 square, basically what you end up with is that no matter how you add up the numbers in any of the lines, you end up with 111, with a total number of 666. So what's crazy is that they believe it's a binding utility, but it also goes back to some prophecies about the resurrection of Apollo. Now, the same entity that we would call Apollo, others call Osiris. So there's a connection there. Apollo and Osiris are the same entity. It's just from two different parts of the world. people can go back and look into the Sibylline prophecies. They can understand that this is a very real connection. The Masonic Lodge has that same 666 square in the skylight of their ritual chamber, which we show in the film, surrounded by the 33rd degree Freemasonic emblems of ISIS. And what's crazy is that directly beneath that 666 square, you have their altar with the holy books, including the Bible. They believe that by putting the Bible underneath this square, that it's binding the power and influence of the Word of God. But it doesn't stop there. There's a secret Bible bound in the testes of the Washington Monument. This Bible was what Dan Brown called the lost symbol. See, people have no idea how these books and this pop culture, such as Dan Brown and others, how they're conditioning us to what's really going on. They're pre-programming us to accept these things. The Dan Brown lost symbol was a Bible, a Masonic Bible, that's bound in the testes of the Washington Monument beneath a 12-foot mini obelisk. Most people don't even know about the 12-foot mini obelisk. We were able to get photos from when they did some renovation work over there. Matter of fact, Atlas Obscura got their hands on the photos, and that's where we first heard about the 12-foot obelisk. No one else knew about it. If you look down at the base of the main obelisk, you have what looks like a sewage hole, a manhole with a metal cover. You pull that thing up, which you can't, but they did, and we got footage of all of this. They pulled it up, and sure enough, you've got a 12-foot mini obelisk. 12 is a mockery of the number of disciples of Jesus Christ. It's also in the occult world, that's the number of the perfect government that they believe that's going to be set up in the Novus Ordo Seclorum. Now, what is the Novus Ordo Seclorum? That is Latin for the new order of the ages. Anybody that carries around a dollar bill in their pocket, pull it out, you'll see the pyramid, you'll see the Novus Ordo Seclorum. That was what this was all about. The founders of this nation knew that this was the land prophesied by the old mystics. They wanted to resurrect their old gods right here on this land, and they knew for a fact that this would be the continent that was going to lead the world in this Novus Ordo Seclorum. I definitely believe that rituals are utilized to obtain technology. And we do a whole breakdown in our film Hollow Earth Chronicles about how the Nazis had this secret group of women known as the Vril Maidens. And they would embark on seances, and in those seances they would begin to automatic write. And they would get information in other languages. Matter of fact, the blueprints given to the Nazis did not for the bell. The Nazis had this craft called the bell, or the Glocke. That information did not just get given to one person. It actually in two separate events in two separate languages. It was years later that they decoded those languages and realized it was all one document. And it was the blueprints for what they believed to be some type of a time machine UFO. Some believe it was a time machine, some believe it was just a flying craft. But yeah, I believe the technology is oftentimes given through satanic rituals and seances. But what I see more is the power and atmospheric shifts that are taking place through these rituals that are changing the course of the direction of America.
Bohemian Grove has the massive ritual that takes place out there on a yearly basis. And this was blown open by Alex Jones. I'm sure a lot of your viewers have seen the dark secrets inside Bohemian Grove. We used a little clip documenting his interview with David Gergen. We chose the David Gergen Street interview to validate, to show that Bohemian Grove is real, to show the secrecy involved in the participants that are members there, and also to show that the ritual is in fact true, that people participate in this, and this is presidents from times past. You know, this is going back to late 1800s, early 1900s. We have in the film we have a whole bunch of images, of pictures that were photographs that were taken, and it shows this this ritual and the different things and practices that took place out there. But to go back to your question about the rituals, the big one that they do there on a yearly basis is the cremation of care. And there's a big giant stone owl out there, and it's very, the only way I can describe it is that it's a high place. It's equivalent to a high place in the Old Testament. It's literally, you're in the groves, you've got your altar set up, sacrifices being done there. And I'm not here to say if it's mock sacrifice or if it's real. I personally believe that it would be real if you're getting the leaders of the world to come out on a yearly basis to go there and to participate in this. I would think that it would be real. Also because of, with it being truly satanic and Luciferian and fulfilling those esoteric belief systems, it would only make sense. Blood is required in high-level rituals to be able to engage the other side. So it would only make sense that they're truly doing rituals out there. But that's the reason we went to Bohemian Grove in the film, is not physically, but while we covered that topic, is just because that's it's an encompassing of your secret societies, your occult systems, but it also shows that the higher ups, the people that are making policy, not just in America, but for the world, they meet out there and they do these things.
There's a very strange ritual that dates back to ancient Egypt, known as the Osiris Rising or the Rising of Osiris ritual. You'll see it listed in different names on the internet, probably. Osiris, he had a conspirator named Set, and Set wanted to do away with Osiris. So he had him cut up into 14 pieces. Now his body's cut up into 14 pieces, he gets thrown into the Nile River, and Isis, of course, isn't happy about this. Isis tries to collect all the pieces up, and she's only able to find 13 pieces. So she fashions together those 13 pieces to form a more perfect union, which is the framework of our 13 colonies, a more perfect union, based off of the myth of Osiris. Now that's showing Egyptian magic even in the framework and the fabric of our foundation, right? It's not an accident that they brought together 13 colonies to form a more perfect union. That was all by design. It was all manufactured. But what's crazy is that she fashions together these 13 pieces, but guess what piece is missing? His genitals. So what do? They set up this ritual. That's what the obelisk is, by the way. The obelisk represents the 14th piece that they couldn't find. It is literally a phallic symbol. You find it in the Vatican, you find it in ancient Egypt, you find it here in the States, you find it all over cemeteries, you find it all over the Masonic lodges. It represents the phallic, the male sex organ of Osiris. And they believe by setting up this ritual, now it's all a recreation of the original ritual that took place between Isis and the 13 pieces of Osiris, which we break down the full ritual in the film. Tom Horn breaks it down right there in the mall area of DC, right between the Washington Monument and the Dome of Isis, which is the Capitol building. Now this is fascinating because the original ritual had to take place between what we would, in a courtyard, between a dome and an obelisk. Putting those two together like that creates a power generator, literally a generator for this ritual. And the idea is that the seed of Osiris, the seed, is going to come up and emit out of the phallic symbol, which is the Washington Monument, and it's going to take over whoever our president is. Now this sounds crazy, but think about this. In ancient Egypt, what had happened was the pharaoh would go through this ritual, he would enter in a man, and he would exit the ritual a god. That was their belief, and they believed that their pharaoh was literally the embodiment of Osiris because of that ritual. They were calling him up out of the underworld. So what we have in America is this same ritual, basically, that the Freemasons believe that they have maintained the proper language in the ritual to a T from the ancient world. They claim to have this still today at the inauguration of every U.S. president. The president is up there, right there between the dome and the obelisk, right there in that power generator, and right around the corner at the Dome, which is what they call the Masonic Mecca of the world, literally. The Dome is this temple, this massive, crazy temple in D.C. They are up there beneath that magic square we were talking about, that magic 666 square, binding the influence and the power of the Word of God. They believe they're binding the power of the Bible while they do this ritual, and they are literally doing the raising of Osiris ritual while the presidential inauguration happens at every election. And they are literally calling on the spirit of Osiris to raise up, or Apollo, however you want to slice it, to come out of the underworld and to possess the president. So the president-elect walks into this ritual a man, exits the ritual a god. This is what the Freemasons believe. Now, people are going to say, well, not every president's a Freemason. Well, most of them have ties to secret societies, but they're not all conscious of the ritual. It doesn't matter. This ritual takes place every inauguration. The Freemasons hold to this. Here's one thing I want to point out about this. The ritual that takes place there it's been going on now since the beginning, to our knowledge, since the beginning of this nation being set up. And they believe that it's going to stick eventually. See, they don't know which president is going to be the final Osiris. Now, they believed in the foundation of this nation that Washington was the type. He was the first Osiris. Technically, every president in their eyes is an Osiris. But the crazy thing is that not every time a ritual is going to stick. They have to keep doing it until it actually sticks, and they get that one that they've been waiting for. This is kind of like when we talk about Babylon working. You know, how many years, was Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard working in the desert trying to get this ritual to stick? They do this at the inauguration of every U.S. president because they believe there is going to come a time and a president that will be the one. He will be the one, and they will go through this ritual when his body lies in state in the Capitol Dome. I believe they're going to do this ritual, and that final raising ritual, that's going to be the one that's going to stick. I don't believe it's going to stick when they're doing it in an inauguration. The real one's going to take place when this Antichrist man dies. They lay him in state in the Capitol building beneath the 72 pentagrams in the apotheosis of George Washington. And that's not it. There's so much more numerology about the Capitol building and the 13 statues and the statutory hall. But I believe that's the real ritual. That's the one where he's going to raise, where the spirit of Osiris, which the Bible talks about this Apollyon coming up from the bottomless pit.
When you visit DC, it feels like you're walking through Rome with all the architecture and all the pagan idols and the statues, the monuments, even down to, and Justin mentioned this about the Roman Pantheon being recreated and shepherded by Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson wanted to see reconstructed pagan temples to the old gods. He wanted that to be what you see. That's when you're walking down DC, this is what you're going to see, and he was successful in that. Being raised to think that America was built as a Christian nation, you would expect to see crosses. You would expect to see statues of apostles. I don't know. That's just what I have in my mind. If you're going to go, you're going to see some representation of that, and you don't see any of that there. Like, it really feels like you're walking in Rome, because you've got all of the structures that are there, and the statues of the deities and what have you. And so with DC, it was set up specifically for that purpose, to be to pay homage to these pagan gods and goddesses. That should be a red flag for many people. But to look at the structure of it, the way that they set up things on purpose, you can look at it, and everybody knows about the pentagrams, and a lot of people will look down and say, even with the pentagram that's on the street layout, they'll look at it and they'll say, oh, well, it's not a complete pentagram because it's missing a leg. Well, if you do any research on that, you'll actually find out that that's even a more powerful pentagram in the occult than a completed one is. So with that set up there, with the whole the layout of the streets and the roads and the buildings being charged, being set up for the pagan gods and goddesses, it's done for a specific purpose, to be able to harness power and give direction. The purpose behind it is actually for rituals, for ritual purposes, to be able to harness the power of Osiris, for example, as we talked about with the inauguration of every U.S. president, and calling down that, or calling up the seat of Osiris to allow the government to have a divine representation. And that goes all the way back to the Pharaoh in Egypt.
Interesting, I had somebody send me a video of, lightning striking the Washington Monument just here recently.
The fuck?
It was a big deal. I don't think it did any damage. I don't know. I didn't really look into it. But the video that I saw, and I suggest somebody, everybody look into this. Look at the video of the recent Washington Monument being struck by lightning. That's what they're calling it, by the way. All I could think about was, this looks like a massive ritual is happening right now. Like, this doesn't just look like lightning striking something. This looks like some Ghostbusters satanic ritual taking place, drawing down the power. I'm not saying that's what was going on, but that's the first thing that crossed my mind as I saw this video footage. So I think that it's possible that, everything going on right now, we're really starting to reevaluate how things are going to look in the end times because of all the things happening, all the propaganda going on right now. With this whole coronavirus scare, it's changing the way that we're seeing some of these things. So I don't know for sure how it's going to look. But the best thing I can say is that it lines up with Scripture. It might appear a little bit
Tips.
different. We're going to see things more clearly as the days unfold. As a matter of fact, I've said this before. 100 years ago, the best Bible scholars could not have seen the type of prophecy being fulfilled that we're seeing today. They wouldn't have understood it. Like, we understand prophecy better now because we've seen so much more unfold. So I think as we get closer, we're going to recognize that. But it's all stepping towards the New World Order. They want the New World Order, and the New World Order is actually seen as a good thing in their eyes. They see it as spreading the democratic commonwealth everywhere. They see it as bringing about that old form of supernatural government in the occult world and setting that up for the New World so that we can all live under this new Atlantis. That's literally the goal that we're heading towards.
The end goal of all this is to bring about this final world system of the Antichrist so that he can reign. We talk about globalization in the film, and we interviewed someone that was part of the United Federalists, and he's an independent. He's a strong believer. Carl Teichert, love him to death, and he talks about an experience that he had going to a UN meeting as an independent of the World Federalists, and they were handed this book, this little booklet, and it talked about the need for a world king. How do you look at that? It sounds immediately very familiar and reminiscent of the Antichrist, a world king, a world dictator. I think the things that we're seeing today is setting the stage for that. As we document in Belly of the Beast, they're having to implode America from the inside in order to bring it down so that they can have a global agenda being fulfilled, so that order out of chaos. There's all these things that we're seeing being fulfilled today. It's because of these people following the orders that they get from their rituals, using the power that they've obtained to be able to bring this about. They're hell-bent on seeing this come to pass. And the end deal, if you look at what the Bible says about it, we're living in these times. Matthew 24 is even more applicable today than it was when it was written. The book of Revelation, same thing, all of it really. It's more applicable today, and it's necessary that we're standing strong in that, standing steadfast in it. Because without it, what hope do we have? Without it, it's going to be like the people taking a knee to Baal. They're going to see this supernatural world king come in, who's going to be filled with the spirit of Satan, literally embodied inside of this human being. So he's going to be doing lying signs and wonders. He's going to have the answers that everybody needs to bring peace in. And the way that you do that is you have to have this problem. This is the Hegelian dialectic. You have this solution that you want to get to. So you create a problem, get the people to react and say, hey, we need to go. Somebody needs to do something about this. And so they'll gladly accept what the end is. They'll gladly accept this next solution. Kind of like, let's use it with the police system right now. Well, we need to defund the police. We really need to go do something about this. Okay, well, we actually got this new police set up over here, And so they've got these new laws and guidelines. We've gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. So here, take this new police. Well, that's also, part of this one-world system that we've been looking at for a long time. What we can expect is a one-world currency. We're seeing the economic system just go to crap because middle class or middle America has not been able to work. We're seeing the implosion of the dollar take place right now because of middle class America not being able to work and provide for themselves. We're seeing people being more dependent on the government to give them help. The elitists, they've already got all the money in the world, so they're sitting back just, watching it go to hell.
The first thing I think that people need to take away is that we've been lied to. A lot of people get offended when you start talking about these types of issues. In Proverbs it says that, a fool is going to discount a topic without looking into it. And that's what I see in America. I see a lot of Americans, and they're just quick to discount things, write you off without even looking into it. Those people who refuse the truth, they're going to be given over to a reprobate mind. They're going to be deceived. And I tell people, you don't have to be deceived. We're living in an age of technology. We're living in an age of information. We can just go to the Library of Congress. We can just go research these things. And so I tell people, take from this film real information, let it change your paradigm if need be, and move forward without having scales on your eyes. Look, we don't know how much time we have on this earth, but we do know that Jesus is going to return. When he does, we need to make sure that we're in good standing with him. We need to make sure that we are not deceived by this global scheme. of the anchor strikes.
Fuck. It's tied.
Whoa!
Heel, toes.
Friendly RAPS activated.
Yeah. Look at that.
Enemy sentry gun has been destroyed.
What did we just find?
I have no earthly idea. Our sentry gun has been destroyed. Enemy in sight. We came up here to look at the missing hunters.
I think we're looking at the church.
Changing back! Enemy down! Kill confirmed.
Following a set of reports concerning strange disappearances involving local hunters, we ventured into a previously unexplored region adjacent to our research area in the North Georgia mountains. Little did we know we would be waylaid by the evidence we uncovered in this mysterious and ancient place.
Enemy UAV spotted.
You can tell that something's crossing right here and that way right there. You can see that path just moving away there.
Our sentry gun has been destroyed. Let's go up that way.
Okay. There's a little bit, well, come here. Come here. Come here right now. That's a tiny footprint.
Whoa!
Heel, toes. You have toes.
Step away from that.
There's toes right here. It's going this way.
Give me your flashlight. Let me see if I can try to get this.
Get it from this
Holy
way.
crap!
Isn't that amazing?
Put the tape measure next to it real quick.
Yeah.
Hunter killer drone inbound. Hostile predator just inbound.
That's wild.
Damn, it's too close.
Let's see if I can try to get it. There we go.
Well, it's going this way. I was looking at it this
No,
way.
that's the heel.
Look at that.
There you go.
Look at those toe indentations. So it's traveling this way. It's traveling that way. And this is the perfect place for something to cross the street.
Yeah,
It's too
Look at
close.
that.
it's wild.
Oh my god.
It's not completely fresh, but
Look at that.
yeah, that's it. That's a footprint.
That's amazing.
That is about 7, about 6.5. 6.5 inches long.
See how wet that is.
2 inches at the toes. About 1.5 inches at the heel. I'm way off, I'm sorry. 1.5 inches at the heel. That's wild.
That is a tiny.
Well, look. What a step there. That's the softest spot.
And right to the rock.
Yeah, there it is.
Look, here's compared to my foot. Look at that. So, this is traveling in this direction here.
Well, I would have stepped there. Come here.
Oh.
See where the moss is clustered down here on the
Not the
this rock?
same size and shape.
Yeah, so step there.
Oh my god.
Hey, this is deep in the area that supposedly had Cherokee little people.
Yeah, it is.
Here's your flashlights. Good cats, man.
Yeah.
That's wild. It's so wild.
Wow.
Alright.
Yeah, let's explore around this area a little
But
more.
then, yeah, right here, you can see in the middle of it. Something stuck there.
Let me look over here, see if there's anything that... I mean, this is the spot right here, which would be... It's a natural creek crossing. You know?
Yeah.
It's the perfect spot. What do you think about that?
That is wild. I'm gonna set so we don't step on it coming back. But here's the deal. Something small like that would have a much easier time of staying hidden
Yeah,
than something that's 7 or 8 feet tall.
for sure.
And then again, right here, you can just see, well,
Wow.
yeah, that's wild. All right, let's go on up.
So you want to go that way, or
Yeah,
you
let's
want
go.
to
Let's follow where these footprints are going. So,
Okay.
Target in sight.
Give me a second to try to figure out how to...
behind you.
You want to have that camera?
But on this instance, it was a secret
So
reason.
there's a bit of a path going that way, or we can go up this hill here.
Let's go up the hill.
A couple options.
Keep an eye out for. Now that's the sandy part of the creek right there.
Yeah, it's wet, so you're gonna get
So
impressions.
people always go, well, why do you only find one print? It's because you're not walking across the Sahara, man. There's multiple different types of ground that we're going over right now. You're not leaving footprints right now where you're walking.
Something is traveling through
Legal
this area.
Research Institute to explore. Use caution when entering this area and bring me back all the precision intel you can find.
Some of these are buried.
This elevator is broken, but no matter. The
I remember we
functional
caught that thing that, if it wasn't a camera artifact, it was something swinging from tree to tree.
Nothing makes me homesick quite like an underground lab. I hoped we'd find something like this. I wonder what other little gems are in here. The entrance could amplify your ability. Anything effective.
You're not going to see any prints back here on all this. These pine needles. Like I said, that was the perfect spot for something to step to leave.
Some of the electronic
You want to head back down to the
might
creek?
not damage it. Keep your eyes peeled for new ones while exploring.
This is a veil for us. Look how big this pine. Look at this thing.
That is a ginormous pine.
Yeah, it's nice. This just feels like an ancient place, you know?
Yeah.
Very wild, secluded.
Take it back. Reloading. Changing back. Cover me.
Let's try this jump right here.
Cover me. Reloading.
A few holes dug. Whoa. Come here now. Come here now. Come here, look at this.
Cover me.
Oh my god.
The hell?
Oh my.
That's not a structure. That's like a little. There's a
Dude,
path.
what the fuck?
Now go find it. Perhaps in one of the
What
other
did we
houses.
just find?
I have no earthly idea. It's built around.
Oh my gosh.
It's built around a living tree. Look, and they're broken. It's not cut. This living tree that still has leaves coming off it has been bent.
Back off this way and get a wide shot of this.
Do me a favor.
Yeah.
Walk under that for me.
You sure?
Pause. Walk under that for me.
Collect some seeds
To get a
by
sense
that.
of scale to it. You're
Yeah,
gonna have to stand.
I'm
You have to crouch.
I'm 5'2", yeah.
Sculpture, as you're like to forget.
So here's the thing.
That tracks are the size of that print, though.
Uh-huh. This is not a lean-to shelter.
No.
Because look at this. It's just an arch. It's just an arch.
I'm honestly shocked right now.
This is wild. This is just, see, there's no place, there's no part, there's no shelter for it.
I'm honestly shocked right now. I'm honestly just, I'm shocked. I'm done.
Stand in front of it for me. I mean, again, you can't preclude that people did this, but why would they do this? And it's an arch that,
Look how far back we are.
well, it's an arch, and if it was something that's going to walk under that, it would be something about the size of those footprints. What the hell, man? We came up here looking at missing hunters.
I think we're looking at the Cherokee Little People.
Why does it always come back to the little people?
This is crazy. I'm honestly, I'm dumbfounded right now.
Anybody can come in here and stack sticks like this. Somebody has
That was what
used, again, a living tree
terrible little seeds don't grow up to be man.
that honestly doesn't even look like it was pushed. Because look at this, there's parts of it coming straight up right now.
Yeah.
So it looks like this was taken down and then just pinned, and all these pieces are broken. None of these pieces are cut.
No. Using your phone to take a photo.
This is wild, man.
This is crazy. I don't even know what to do right now, though. Definitely did not expect this.
It seems like a little ceremonial arch.
Of course, you didn't even walk through it.
This is wild, man. Built around a living tree. All this is dead body. A broken limb has been broken off, not cut. That remains support. What is that? Is that a holly?
Yeah. Here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go over here and sand a little bit around
So
the
wild.
Joe? Come here. What is this?
No clue. I have no clue.
These have been here for a while. Look. There's dirt up on the side of them with
This was
rings.
sunk down in.
Yeah. These rings have been here. Well, this is almost a spiral.
That is a spiral.
That's a spiral.
It starts here. And then
It's all quartz. It's all white quartz. These are spirals made of white quartz.
Well, look at these two. These two don't look like these look purposely placed. These two right here. I gotta get better with the camera here because I'm so excited right now.
I know,
Yeah,
I know.
you find her.
I'm gonna use your phone.
These are not fire rings.
No, they're not. No, these are almost like spirals made out of quartz, symbols.
This is bizarre.
This is crazy. This is crazy. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's not natural. That's been placed by hand. Let's look at this sand right here and see it.
Yeah.
Let's go in that direction. Let's slowly go across this.
I wanted to check out this area real quick. Gosh. It's just so much. Might have another print.
Yeah, you might. That is.
Up. Front of the foot here. Front of the little foot. Front of the little foot right there.
This is wild.
This is really wild. This is really wild. This is...
Not what we were looking for?
No, I think we're having a change.
It's not what we're geared up for?
No. Well, maybe. I mean,
Oh, hey. You have the impression of 10 foot. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it on the camera right there. That's just so weird.
oh my God.
What do you got?
I'm just...
Oh, I thought you had something.
No, I'm just trying to process right now. I'm just trying to process right now, like that. Primarily. And these stones.
Two what look like they were spirals. They're supposed to be. This one almost looks like a.
This circle.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what the. But that does look like it was a spiral, maybe. But then it's leading right into that.
Yeah. Alright, I want to check this out and we'll cross over and go further up the creek. Because this kind of ends here. What?
Kind of looks like a larger footprint. I can't tell.
Yeah. This is bizarre.
That's larger though. That's like a little bigger than my foot.
Yeah.
If that's a footprint, that's up for debate.
Let's cross over and check out this area over here. Be careful through here.
Here's that thing. One second. On the other side. As you can see, we got no shelter.
Okay. The sun's going to set right behind it.
Aw.
Yeah, it is. Wild. Because when you do a lean-to, you want something that you can lay on. Or
That's a gate or something.
it's like an archway.
It's an archway. But get it right here so you can see the sun's going to go right down behind it. I don't know if that means anything or not, but worth a gander.
There's small little impressions back all through here. That comes here.
Definitely some traveling happening back through here.
It's like a little network path back here.
Yes.
I'm still saying this, man. Out of anything that I
Look at this.
thought was possible when we started doing this, little people were not.
Come over here. Look at this. Look at the swampy area.
What is going on where you are? I'm trying to locate you on the map.
Go this way maybe.
like Lord of the Rings back here.
Incarnation of these creatures. You cannot escape them.
Fuck.
Creation space. Perhaps try something with magnificent or
Flip them over here.
Changing back.
Wow,
Cover me. Reloading.
that's crazy.
Again, I mean, you can't.
Changing back.
Something with hands like that.
Yeah.
People could come back here and make it, but that's not a lean-to shelter. You know, that's not even really anything to string your truck on. That's just an archway. Somebody made a tiny little archway that's too short for a 5'2" person to walk over.
Yeah.
And then we're finding footprints that are smaller than yours back here.
Yeah.
perhaps try something with
Just keep going deeper.
magnificent or
I mean, something's traveling through here. This is crazy back here. Look how concealed it is. This gets really thick back here.
Cover me. Reloading. Reloading. Cover me.
Say, here's some really old barbed wire fences.
Reloading. Cover me.
Old homestead site.
This is an old homestead site. Yep. Look at the shape of the land. Yeah, look at the shape of the land. I bet there was an old house up here at one point. Wow. This is crazy up here. Well, this is on the short list for tonight. For sure.
Changing
Well,
back.
this derailed. Well, I mean, it doesn't necessarily derail. This was not what we thought would possibly be responsible for people going missing up in here, but
We don't
just
know.
because something small doesn't mean it's like cute and cup.
Yeah.
The Cherokee legends of the little people, I mean, they gave them wide berth, you know?
Yeah.
They were definitely not to be taken lightly.
Changing back.
Which one it is?
Let's keep moving.
Look at this. Look at this. How this is. Look, this is pinned beneath this. It's part of this tree. And then that one.
Fuck off.
That's wild.
This is a crazy area.
This is crazy back here.
Keep back up. Reloading. Changing back. Cover me.
There's a hole in the back here.
Okay.
Don't step over here. Let's maybe. It looks like a column right there. It sounds like a column all around here.
Yeah, it does.
There's gonna be a lot of speculation about that. Go this way. And look at this thing here. Look how creepy this is.
Reloading. Cover me. Reloading.
That sounds hollow underneath all these trees.
I'm about to know.
That's what's weird. That's what's weird to me. Alright, let's head down this way.
For the next round.
You'd have to be pretty small to navigate through all of this brush like this. Look at this. Right here. This mound. There's something very strange about this terrain.
Yeah, you can tell there's an old homestead here. Now, part of this would have been, I don't know.
As the day drew on, we traveled over the mountain to scout and investigate another area in this vast wilderness known for strange occurrences. But as the night closed in, we decided to return to the site of the small arch to get a look at the area after dark and see what creatures might be stirring in the moonlight.
Friendly RAPS activated. Friendly hunter-killer drone. Reloading. Kill confirmed. Tango down. Target down. Reloading. Friendly RAPS activated. Kill confirmed. Friendly hunter-killer drone enemy contact. Reloading.
Man, it wasn't even set up to record yet.
Yeah.
Enemy inside.
That was not a barn. That was a, oh!
I'm hoping I caught him. I ramped up the mic halfway through it.
I told you I heard like a sing-song type noise up here right out of the truck.